And it's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker tonight, who is Kelly Shackleford. And as I was speaking with him earlier in the evening, I promised him I would only say good things about him. Well, that's true, because I only know good things about Kelly Shackleford. He and his Liberty Institute came to my attention when I first became involved in politics in about 2008. And Kelly has been fighting for religious freedom, for liberty in general, and for the Constitution and the Bill of Rights for a good many years. He has been president and CEO of First Liberty Institute since 1997. He is a constitutional scholar who has argued before the United States Supreme Court, testified before the U.S. House and Senate on constitutional issues, and has won 3 state landmark First Amendment and religious liberty cases in the past few years alone. He was recently named one of the 25 greatest Texas lawyers of the past quarter century by Texas Lawyer, and is the recipient of the prestigious William Bentley Ball Award for Life and Religious Freedom Defense for his leadership and pioneering work protecting religious freedom. He is a highly sought-after speaker for national TV and radio, and he is on the Board of Trustees of the United States Supreme Court Historical Society. And this is the best thing, he is a cum laude graduate of Baylor University here in Texas. Please welcome Kelly Shackleford.
Okay, I figure we've got people here who are friends and people who are maybe new friends and maybe don't know enough, so I'm going to do a couple of things at one time, kind of update the other folks and then kind of introduce the new folks. So let me start out with the basics, which is what's First Liberty? First Liberty is the largest legal organization in the country that all we do is religious freedom. So if you're Giovanni Rubio and you're a 9-year-old boy and you're told you can bring anything you want to school to read during free reading time until you bring your Bible, and then you're told, oh no, you can't have religious books at school, and you're a poor family, you live outside of Miami-Dade, what do? Right? I mean, you don't have hundreds of thousands of dollars to go hire legal teams. Well, that's why we exist. We come in, we bring in the best litigators in the country, they donate their time for free, we represent Giovanni, and so when we win the case, as we did, Giovanni's case, we don't just win for Giovanni and his family, but we set a precedent that protects all of our children and our grandchildren. And that's why First Liberty does what they do. How did I get involved in this? Back when I was in high school, I knew my gifts were in analytical thinking and speaking, and so I thought I didn't need to be a pastor or a lawyer. And people said, well, that's like a God or Satan choice, isn't it, to be a pastor or a lawyer? And I analyzed my DNA and realized I would probably do better at dispensing justice rather than mercy, and so I'd probably make a better lawyer than a pastor. And went to law school, got out. When I got out, I clerked for a federal judge for a year. You do that for 1 year. You sort of see what it's like on the other side of the bench, which is a unique perspective. And after that year, all the big law firms give you nice offers to come work at their firm because very few people get that perspective. And I just thought, you know, Lord, I just don't feel like that's what I'm being called to do. I feel like I'd suffocate if I did just the regular law thing. And I remember thinking, well, what do you want to do? And I thought, well, I should use my legal skills because the Lord showed me I should do that from law school. But I want to help pastors and churches, religious freedoms and our founding principles. And I'd even like to go to seminary part-time if I could. And I laughed because there's no job to pay you to do that. And about 2 weeks later, 2 guys called me. I'd never met these guys. They were partners in major law firms. And they said, look, we started donating our time for religious freedom. We're now getting so many calls, it's hurting our ability to make a living. So we were wondering, would you be willing to come on, do cases, help pastors, churches, religious freedoms, and our founding principles? And you could even go to seminary part-time if you wanted to. And their deal was, we just need to know how much you need to live on, and I was making $28,000 as a federal clerk, and so these guys pitched in out of their pocket to get me started, and that was 29 years and about 4 months ago. And now First Liberty Institute is the largest legal organization in the country that all we do is religious freedom. So it's one of those stories of something that exists now that I could have never imagined the need for not only a group, but a group that has grown as we've had to grow because of what's happening in the country. And so I thought a good place to start out would be some basics, which is, why is this important? Why is religious freedom important? People of faith immediately kind of understand, hey, I mean, it's the only hope for our country. And if people don't hear the truth and don't have their lives changed, then really we're going off the cliff. But it even goes further than that. Our founders referred to this liberty as our first liberty, because they understood that if you lose this one, you'll lose all your freedoms. And so I thought I would start with just a little video. This is a guy who supports us, who's not even a person of faith. He doesn't have any religious background. He just understands the connection with freedom, and he experienced it in his own life. And so let's start with that video.
If somebody told us that we were going to be crawling through barbed wire fences and escaping and moving across the ocean to America, everybody would have said, that's absolutely silly, that'll never happen. If they caught, let's say, a politician who opposed them, they put him on trial, but the evidence might have been presented, but the outcome was a foregone conclusion. So they had total control of you. That's how a dictatorship is run. My father was, first of all, very patriotic, had strong beliefs in democracy. The people that he helped were, if not friends, very good acquaintances. He knew they were going to get killed. So when he got arrested, my mother got arrested, and my brother, who was 8 years older, got arrested. So my whole family, except me, were in jail. Then my father would have been executed, but my mother managed to bribe the judge. He got sent to concentration camp in lieu of that, where he was, beaten, not fed. I mean, basically tortured. As soon as he escaped, his name was on the radio all the time, and as one of the most wanted people. And there was a Secret Service sitting in our front hallway all the time. As you study history, one needs to be vigilant all the time, because you cannot take anything for granted. When you start losing freedoms, it is more than likely that it'll keep on chipping away. The opportunities we have, the ability to express yourself and do whatever you want to do and be able to achieve things without being blocked are unparalleled. The political correctness is ridiculous. I mean, it is going too far. Defending the ability to have crosses or Christmas decorations just is getting to a point of absurdity. When I think about what was happening in Czechoslovakia at that time, there are parallels, because I think anytime you start taking away people's freedom, it just goes on. And you must take guard in the early stages as opposed to wait and let it all collapse when it's too late. Nobody expected communism in Czechoslovakia when it happened. It happened.
As I mentioned, Peter is a guy who's not even a person of faith, and came up to me after a talk and said, look, I saw this happen in my country. They took down the religious symbols, and within 2 months, and they put up secular symbols, and within 2 months, we all lost our political freedoms. And he handed me a big check and said, I'm not a person of faith, but I'm going to be supporting you guys, and every few months he sends in a check. And he just understands that if you lose religious freedom, you'll lose all your freedoms. There's a basic reason for that. I mean, the one thing that totalitarianism can never allow are citizens who hold an allegiance to one higher than the government. So whenever you see that kind of an oppressive regime come to power, the first flashpoint is always going to be these people that won't bow a knee to the government. Religious freedom. And so that being the case, how are we doing in the United States? Well, not too great. You probably know this, but there's more attacks now than ever in our history. You've seen, I mean, we've had 2 cases in the last just few years, right, where sermons were actually subpoenaed of pastors were subpoenaed by the government. One of those is in Texas. The other one was a case we had in Georgia, against the state of Georgia, where they did the same thing. I think of, like Audrey Jarvis, we've got a picture, I think, of Audrey, who was ordered at a state university to remove her cross necklace because, quote, it might offend someone at the school. This happens all the time now. We get calls on this. Our newest client, one of our newest clients, is a woman who lives in government housing who was actually ordered by police that she was not allowed to pray in her own home. And we're now having to fight this at the Federal Court of Appeals, believe it or not. So the stuff that we're fighting is just really unheard of. And we do a little survey every year of all the attacks on religious freedom and put it into a book. And this is the one we released about a month ago. And by the way, you can, not that you want to, but you can print this out. It's on our website. It's free. But you can see this is everything from a 5-year-old girl who was caught praying over a meal and told, quote, it's not good to pray at school, to senior citizens who were actually told their meals are going to be taken away because they were federally funded and they were praying over their meals, and that would violate separation of church and state. So quickly what you see as you start going through is, it's poor people, it's rich people, it's young people, it's old people, it's in the north, it's in the south, it's pervasive, it's literally, there's nowhere you can go. And these are just the published ones. These are the ones that they're in the case books or they're in the newspaper, just the tip of the iceberg. So, and this is a 133% increase just in the last, I think 4 or 5 years alone. So these attacks are not slowing down. So I thought a good way how do you do this? For instance, we had 434 legal matters last year. Obviously, I can't go through 434 legal matters, so I thought I'll take a few areas and quickly give you a feel for some things, some of which you've heard about probably, and give you an update. Let's start with going after people in their work. Because if you lose religious freedom in the workplace, then that's where most people spend most of their waking hours. You've lost religious freedom. I mean, if they control your paycheck, then they control your life. And so we're having to defend people, both employers who want to run their business in accordance with their faith, and employees. And 2 examples I can give you, one of which I'm sure you've heard of, is the Aaron and Melissa Klein sweet cakes case. This is a couple that are bakers, or were bakers in the state of Oregon, and had a little bakery shop that they planned to pass down to their kids. And had 2 women come in, lesbian women, and wanted to buy baked goods from them. They had no problem with that. They said, sure, oh, absolutely. And then they came in and said, we want you to do our wedding cake. And they said, well, we can't do that because as Christians, we do our cakes custom, and we do them specifically to the glory of God, and we talk to the people, and we just have different beliefs on this. But there's a place we can refer you to. They'll do a great job, and they did that. The next thing they knew, the state of Oregon was prosecuting them, essentially, because of their religious beliefs. As you probably heard at this point, they've been fined $135,000. Their business has been bankrupted. They were ordered by the judge not to speak publicly their beliefs about marriage. That's not a violation of the First Amendment. And so I thought, sometimes these things sound interesting, but people don't put a face to it. So I just want you to watch a quick video so you can see that these are real people and these are the kinds of things that are going on in the country.
I've always been very artistic. It's definitely my passion. I put all myself, my heart, and my soul into them, and then I step back and it's this beautiful work of art, and again, you get to eat it. So we dedicated our bakery before we opened our shop because we wanted everything that we did in our shop to be done to glorify the Lord, to put a smile on God's face. It was definitely a really good, booming business.
It was a normal day at the shop. She came in with her mom. I asked for the name of the bride and groom. She informed me this time the cake was for her, and there was 2 brides. I was apologetic. I informed her, I'm really sorry, we don't do cakes for same-sex weddings.
We served these to women in the past. We had a great time. When I do a cake, I feel a part of what these people are celebrating. For me to bake a cake for a same-sex wedding would fully go against what I believe.
About 2 weeks afterward, I got a letter in the mail from the Oregon State Department of Justice or Attorney General's office. We had to pay them $135,000. Nothing was off limits. Our vehicles, our house, everything was on the table for this judgment. Soon after that, we saw some of the worst things you can imagine.
We have 5 beautiful children.
We had people saying, I hope your kids get sick and die.
And we lost our business. I always just thought that, it was going to be a family business, that we would get to just have that for the rest of our lives. And you work so hard to build something up, and something that you poured your heart into and was your passion, and to lose that has just been devastating for me, all because we couldn't participate in an event we had to lose our business over. It doesn't make sense to me.
The government here is violating the Klein's constitutional rights, their rights to free speech, the free exercise of their religion, and their religious liberty. All Aaron and Melissa Klein want is the right to be able to run their business consistent with their faith. Instead, the government has destroyed their business in going after them personally.
We stood up for our faith. To me, that's like what's saying that was what we did wrong, is that we stood for what we believe. I do not regret it at all. God has drastically changed my life. And I am somebody today that is so different from who I was before. And the way I feel like with our business is that I would give my business up in a second for him because of what he's done for me.
This time they went after the Kleins. If they can take their rights away, what's to keep them from taking your rights away? If the government can tell the Kleins that they can't live out their beliefs, they can come after any of our beliefs on anything.
Whatever people's beliefs about same-sex marriage, the thing that as Americans we should be able to agree upon is that we have a right to hold different beliefs on same-sex marriage. And that's what's under attack here. And what's happened to the Kleins is really disgraceful. It should never happen in the United States of America. So we're going to continue to fight this until we get a victory. And Oregon's obviously a very liberal place, but we still plan on winning. The other kinds of cases that are happening, and there's a lot of examples, but are employees. Actually there's a case I was going to tell you about. We just actually officially became public today that we had won. But it was a teacher, Tony Richardson, who was actually disciplined because she said to a coworker who went to her church, "I'll be praying for you." And they said it was unprofessional to tell a coworker that you would be praying for them. They put that in her file. It was going to hurt her employment history, and we actually had to file a federal lawsuit in order for them to finally today decide that they didn't want any more of the federal lawsuit. But these are the kind of things we're going to fight now, is the ability of somebody to say to a fellow coworker who goes to their church that I'm going to be praying for you. The good news is we've had a number of these religious freedom in the workplace cases. We've won every one of them up to this point, but we're having to fight many more than we have before. The second area that I mentioned is the schools. And again, I could give you a lot of examples, but I'll just give you the one that to me is the most emblematic of kind of the battle we're in, and that's the Coach Kennedy case. Coach Kennedy was 20 years in the Marines, got out, and the night before his first day as a coach, saw this video, this movie, Facing the Giants. And it's, of course, a Christian movie about Christian coaching and football team. It just convicted him. And so he made a promise to God. He said, after every football game, when we go to the center of the field and we see the other coaches, we shake their hands, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to a knee and I'm going to give thanks to you for the privilege of coaching these young men that I get to coach. And so for 7 years, that's what he did. Until the school district sent him a letter and said, if you go to a knee, you're going to be fired. And so Coach Kennedy made a pledge to the Lord, so he went to the knee and he was fired. And this is an incredible guy who is the exact kind of guy you want to be coaching your kids. In fact, the Seattle newspaper, the editorial writer wrote an editorial saying, look, I'm an agnostic, but if my kids are old enough, this is the coach I would want for my kids. because anybody who sees Coach Kennedy immediately knows how much he loves the kids and he pours into them, does everything he can, and that's why he actually is humble enough to go after the game to a knee to thank God for the privilege of being able to coach these young men. The fact that this is the guy that we're now trying to run off shows you how exactly backwards our country is becoming. This is unfortunately in the state of Washington, which is in the Ninth Circuit. The Ninth Circuit is the most liberal federal court of appeals in the country, out of San Francisco. So we knew where we had to go before we got to the Supreme Court. And the Ninth Circuit just ruled about a month ago in the case. And their ruling was, since the school district admitted that the coach never ever tried to coerce any student in any way towards prayer, that wasn't anything they could hang their hat on. So their decision said that no coach is allowed to pray in public if, quote, anyone can see them. That means a spectator, anyone. So if a coach prays in public and anyone can see them, that's a violation of the law in the Ninth Circuit. So it was exactly the kind of ruling we expected from the Ninth Circuit, and they're overturned more than any federal court of appeals in the country. And so we're now, on our way to what's called en banc, which means the full Ninth Circuit, and then eventually to the U.S. Supreme Court. Some of you probably realize that Donald Trump, as a candidate, even tweeted twice about the Coach Kennedy case, saying this should never happen in America. So we'll see what the Justice Department does as well when we go to the Supreme Court, whether they file or whether they sit on their backside and don't say anything. We'll see. We think we can get the president to speak into this because he has before. But to me, this is an example of the kind of battle going on in our schools. The third area is the military. And there's a lot of cases. We actually, 6 years ago, didn't even have a division, but we had to actually create a division just for religious freedom in the military because of all the attacks that were occurring on people who serve. And probably some of the ones you've seen are the ones against veterans memorials. The first one we had was the Veterans Memorial that was put up in 1934 by World War I vets who'd come back from the war and wanted to do something to remember. And so in the middle of 1.6 million acres of desert, they put a little lone 7-foot cross with a little plaque on the bottom that said, "For the dead of all wars," and had their VFW post. And it sat there for 70 years until the ACLU filed a lawsuit and said, "You got to tear this down, we can't have crosses on federal property." And the Federal District Court and Court of Appeals said, "Tear it down." And we jumped in at that point on the way to the Supreme Court. We represented the American Legion, the VFW, the Military Order of the Purple Heart, American Ex-Prisoners of War, and said, "Don't you dare tear that down." And I want to show you a picture of what the court ordered be done to this memorial while it was on appeal. They ordered that they put a bag over the cross, the memorial. You can see there's a bag with a chain around the bottom and a padlock. You look at that picture and you think, what country is this in? It's in the United States. Now some people say, why do you make a big deal about that? You got that reversed. True. The Supreme Court reversed it, the bag is off, the memorial is back up, it's there to stay. We won at the Supreme Court 5-4, and Justice Scalia was the 5th vote. So it tells you we're one vote away from this being a law in the United States of America. Now, you'd think at least the attacks were over. No, now we're defending the Bladensburg Veterans Memorial, which was put up almost 100 years ago. It was put up in 1925, in part by money from mothers who lost their sons in World War I. This was dedicated to the 49 young men in Prince George's County, Maryland, who died in World War I. And again, it's been up for a long time. In fact, it was originally put up on American Legion land, but eventually the government decided that this was a great area for a highway, and they built a highway, but in the 1960s, they certainly weren't going to in any way touch a Veterans Memorial like this in any way, so they built the highway around it. And so now the American Humanists have brought a lawsuit saying this is now on government land and it has to be torn down. And we had a 3-judge panel at the Federal Court of Appeals. This is a Federal Court of Appeals that's been stocked full of judges under the Obama administration. So we had 2 Obama appointees and 1 Clinton appointee as the 3 judges. And it was a 2-to-1 decision, so even the 3 Democrats couldn't agree. But the Clinton appointee actually wrote a vigorous dissent saying in no way on God's green earth is this unconstitutional. But the majority, the two other judges said this is unconstitutional and has to be torn down. And during the oral argument, one of those judges asked the following question: if we just cut the arms off the cross, won't that take care of any offense? So, I mean, this is the kind of mindset we're dealing with. Well, the other thing that's interesting about this case is this Fourth Circuit covers not only Maryland, but the state of Virginia. And there's another cemetery in that area called Arlington National Cemetery. Okay? There's a 24-foot cross there, the cross of sacrifice. There's a 14-foot cross, the Argonne cross. There's a tomb of the unknown soldier that says known but to God. If this is the precedent and it stays, then they're going to have to go into Arlington with a bulldozer and take those crosses down. So this is an outrageous decision. It's so outrageous that an editorial was even published in the Washington Post today saying this is really getting out of hand. And the Washington Post even said that they shouldn't tear this down. So that's how radical this decision is. But needless to say, we're appealing. We're going to what's called the en banc, Fourth Circuit first, and then we'll go to the Supreme Court if we have to. But these attacks on the veterans memorials has to stop. I wish I could tell you it's only against the memorials, but it's not. We're having to represent chaplains. We're having to represent all kinds of military situations where people are being attacked for their faith. And probably a great example of this is the Oscar Rodriguez case. Oscar, 33-year Air Force veteran, and got out, and if you've ever seen the flag folding ceremonies that are often done, Oscar has come up with a great sort of speech that goes with that flag folding ceremony. And it ends by saying, God bless our flag, God bless our troops, God bless America. And there was a guy who was having a private retirement from the Air Force. He said, you know, I've heard you give that speech before. He said, would you do that at my private retirement ceremony? Oscar said, I'd be happy to. And so he did that. And while the cameras were going, unbeknownst to many, the head of that base, a colonel, decided he didn't want God mentioned anywhere on the base, even in a private retirement ceremony. So as Oscar gets up, as the flag is being unfolded, and he gets up to say this, this speech, uniformed military, you can see on film, are grabbing him, accosting him, and throwing him out of the room because he's going to mention God. I never thought in my entire life I would ever see uniformed military putting their hands on the United States citizens to throw them out of a room because they were going to mention God. And so again, you can see for yourself. Watch the video about Oscar Rodriguez.
I knew that very early in life that there was something incredibly special about this country. When I was a child, during baseball games, one of the most emotional parts of that was the national anthem. And I always tried to hide my tears from my brothers because I knew that many men died for that freedom to be able to have a hot dog and watch a baseball game. And when you see that flag waving, it resonated in me. And I knew that I had to be there. I had to participate in this. So I knew that when I turned 18 that I was going to join the military.
Well, Oscar Rodriguez is a decorated 33-year Air Force veteran and a retiree now. And he has a history of giving very stirring and moving flag-folding speeches at military events and civic events throughout the community.
One of the individuals that came up to me and shook my hands, he was going to retire. He says, Sergeant Rodriguez, I've heard that speech on CDs. I heard it in person a long time ago. It would just be wonderful if you could do that for my family. And I looked at him and I said, absolutely.
As a private citizen and an Air Force veteran, Oscar has the right under the First Amendment to engage in speech, including religious speech.
To have my fellow family throw me out of the ceremony because of the mention of God is beyond me.
When Master Sergeant Roberson's commanding officer found out that Oscar was going to be performing this flag-folding speech that was going to mention the word God, he took steps to have Oscar banned from the ceremony, and when he found out that he didn't have the legal authority to ban Oscar, a private citizen, from this ceremony, he then had members of his command in uniform show up to remove Oscar.
I stood up, went to my position, faced the audience, and this individual comes up to me, and he says, you're not going to do this, are you? I'm thinking, so what is he talking about, that I'm really going to do what? Mention God? yeah, I'm really going to do that. As soon as I hear my cue, I start with my speech. And they grab me, and they pull me, they assault me as the flag is open, because I dare to mention God.
The tragic irony here is that flag-folding speech talks about the fact that the United States flag stands for freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of conscience. And it was those very words that resulted in Oscar being assaulted and forcibly dragged away by men wearing the uniform of the United States Air Force, men who were sworn to protect people like Oscar and their right to engage in that very speech. Our military service members make huge sacrifices to defend our freedoms every day. We're committed to defending the religious freedom of every U.S. military man, woman, and veteran, just like Oscar.
It is this one nation under God that we call with honor the United States of America. God bless our flag. God bless our troops. God bless America.
Again, Air Force announced immediately in the Pentagon that they were going to do a full investigation, and they did. At the end, they found no problem with anything. Needless to say, we have a lot more information than they know that we have, and things are about to get very difficult for the Air Force. We're in a lawsuit, and it's about to... So anyway, you might say at this point, boy, I'm really glad I went to the Tea Party meeting and to hear the depressing speaker talk about our country. So let me tell you the good news. The good news is we have a method of dealing with this, and it's not a theory. It's something we've been doing for 20 years now, and it works. It's working. And that is, if you look at how normal nonprofit legal organizations operate, I don't care if they're left-wing or right-wing or what their issue is, the same model. Raise as much money as you can raise, hire as many attorneys with that money as you can, put them in an office in DC or LA or New York, and then fly them around the country and cover as many of your issues as you can cover. That's not our model. Our model is there's all these people of faith who went to law school because they wanted to stand for what was right. And 30 years later, these are now the best litigators at the best law firms in our country, in fact, in the world. And they've done honorable work for their clients, major corporations, clients, etc. But they've never gotten to do a case with their faith or their country. So we go and we sit down with those best of the best, and we say, look, if we give you everything you need, are you willing to give your time in one of these cases? I know you charge $1,500 an hour, you're one of the tops in the country, but would you be willing to do this pro bono on this type of case? And they're like, I've been waiting my whole life, sign me up. But we know what's going to happen when we give them that first case. All their talent, all their gifts, all their training, everything they've learned is for the first time in their life lined up with their faith, their love for their country. They've never felt that before. And it's kind of unfair, but we now know we have them for the rest of their lives as part of long-term attorneys. And they're the big partners, so they're the ones that give cover then for the younger attorneys, and they get to taste what it's like. So we've now built this up to where if you go to the top 50 law firms in the country, you would find a significant percentage of those law firms don't just donate their time, they fight each other over who gets to donate their time. And the result of this method is twofold. Number one, average case, for every $10,000 we spend, we get $60,000 donated. It's like a 6-to-1 return on our money. But number two, and this is what I wasn't counting on, is the win-loss ratio. If you watch the nonprofits, I don't care who they are, the ACLU, whoever, you'll watch, they'll win, they'll lose, they'll win, they'll lose. If they're really good, maybe they're 60-40 or 50-50. Our win rate now for 17 years in a row has been above 90%. And it's because of God's favor, but it's ultimately, this is God's method. This is the body doing what it's supposed to do. So if we have a case in Montana, our attorney lives in Montana. He's at the biggest law firm in Montana. He's the best litigator in Montana. When he goes into court, he looks at the judge, he sees, a former law partner or, a guy he lost a tooth with in first grade. Okay, when the ACLU guy flies in from New York City, he's playing an away game. He doesn't know the jury, he doesn't know that community. So you can see, if you get the best of the best, you get people who live in these communities, who know their communities, they're known as being the best, and you have this history of our country being built on religious freedom and our Constitution, we should win 90% of our cases or more. And we will continue to do that. And so I want to show you something. You don't see a lot of encouraging thing. Let me show you, if people stand up, they're willing to win. We were a Texas group originally, as many of you heard of us, but about 5 years ago, everybody was saying, hey, you got to come and do a case in our state, because when you're winning, at the time we were winning about 97, 98% of our cases. They said, we want you to come to our state. And so we prayed about, the need was so great across the country, and we had a method that nobody else was using. We really felt God compelling us to go national. So when we did, this is how we got pulled in year 1 outside of Texas. But now that people around the country are joining the army of what we're doing, I want you to see where we are right now, 5 years later. Okay. And that's huge numbers, which is bad, but huge numbers, which is good, because we're winning over 90% of all these cases. And the only thing preventing us from covering the entire map, to be honest, is just more resources. Because the way it works is every attorney we bring on staff and support staff, that frees up about 20 of the national litigators to then give their time. And so we have a lot of great national litigators waiting to get involved, because we don't have enough support structure for all the need. We're getting so many calls every day with people whose rights are being violated. So just know, you don't hear a lot of good news. There is good things happening. And then add to that, we felt like we had plenty to do already. I think we're probably within the next month, we're going to have about 6 cases on their way to the Supreme Court at the same time. I mean, it's just unheard of what's going on. But then all of a sudden, this guy got elected last year that we weren't expecting. And we started looking at, oh my gosh, I think there are about 200 new opportunities to advance religious freedom that didn't exist before this election. And we started mapping those out. I mean, we can draw up regulations or things, hand them to people in the government, and they can be implemented immediately and affect millions of people. I'm not saying that's happened, but it's theoretically it could have happened. There are things like judges being appointed. Like at the time President Trump was elected, there were 128 judicial seats waiting to be filled, lifetime appointments. Okay, we're now up to over 160. And so we realized we had to be involved in that. And so we literally had to go back to our board, get a new budget with extra money, go out and try to find new money somewhere to hire new people, because I can't take people off Supreme Court cases to work on vetting judges. We had to have more people. So we're in the midst of what we're calling our 2-year plan this year and next year, because we don't know we have any longer than that, because the Senate could change and all these judicial appointments, all that could stop. But all I can tell you is the Supreme Court justice that you saw appointed would not have been appointed without what we did behind the scenes. And I will tell you, well, there was somebody else going to be appointed, and it would have been a mistake, and we stopped that. There have been 50 nominees by the President so far to federal judicial seats for life. As an example of the type of people, 2 of our employees have been nominated to be federal judges for life. Our volunteer attorneys are being nominated to federal courts of appeals all over the country, the highest levels in the country. This week, you're going to see, or you're going to hear about probably 2 days from now, 2 of the people from Texas that are going to get a hearing and moving very quickly on their way to be federal judges at our federal court of appeals for Louisiana, Texas, and Mississippi. One of them is our most active volunteer attorney in the country, clerk for Justice Thomas, a brilliant guy, and will never swerve from the Constitution. The other is a good friend of ours that a lot of you know, Don Willett, who's on the Texas Supreme Court. They're both getting a hearing on Wednesday. These are the kind of people that are being put into the courts, and I mean, as I said, we have these contacts all over the country. We know who the really top attorneys are, who are also willing to actually donate their time because they care about the Constitution. How many attorneys do you know that will give up $1,000 an hour for free because they want to preserve the Constitution? These are the kind of people we want on the court, because they're never going to budge on the way they interpret the Constitution and making sure that they defend the Constitution. Well, it's happening. It's happening all over the country. And it's just a story that's not being told, because people are looking at a bunch of silly stuff and they're not watching the stuff that's really important. So I just tell you this to know there's a lot of great things happening. And I would say we're in the midst now of a window of opportunity. I don't know when that window is going to close. Is it going to close in a year and 2 months from now? I don't know. But I know that while it's open, there's an urgency to what we're doing. And we have to move fast, and we have to do everything we can to do good while there's an opportunity, and while the Lord's given us this opportunity. And so I know I'll end this, and then I know we're about at the end of the time, so I don't know if we should take questions or not. But we passed out a card. Somebody was asking, what are some action items? A number of you probably already get our information. If you don't, there's a card that was at every chair. And one side is to put your name and info. The other side is like how you want to be involved, like if you want to be on the prayer team or however. But the key is, if you want to get the information, I would love for you to just fill out your name. And we don't ever give that to anybody else. But there's two things you can do if you have the information. Number one, you can pray. You don't even know about a lot of these cases if you're not on our list, because you're not going to hear about them, in the New York Times. I mean, they did the Bladensburg Veterans Memorial case. They might have done 2 or 3 other of our 400 legal matters last year. You're not going to hear about most of what's really going on. So I'd love for you to be in prayer. Number two, I'd love for you to be the person who educates other people. I mean, if we win cases and we win rights, but nobody knows they have them, then really we haven't won much. So if you get information on what people's rights really are and you share those with your community of people, then all of a sudden people are emboldened to live those rights out fully. And so that's what I would love for you to do if you get on our list and you're involved. So everybody who fills out one of those, Don Spack's right here, raise your hand there, Don. Give it to Don before you leave. You don't even have to do a stamp, and he will make sure you get on the Insider's Update list on kind of what's going on. So that's something you can really do, because most of you, you're like, I'm not a lawyer, thank goodness. So how do I do something with you guys? One of the ways to hook in with what's going on, be the Paul Revere that sends the information to other people, pray, and then you might even see things that you go, gosh, I wonder if that's happening in my community, and a lot of times you'll find it is. Or you might be the person that refers somebody else, hey, there's a place you can go and get help if you're having these issues or somebody's threatening you because of your faith. So anyway, I know Julie shook her head to take a couple of questions, so I'm happy to take a couple of questions. I'll start right here. Yeah.
You said there were 5 major areas, and how many? Workplace, schools?
Oh no, I'm 3. I was going to go over 3 major areas. She asked, did I say 5 major areas? What we're committed to, we separate all of our cases into 4 areas, which is in our schools, our military, our churches or religious organizations, and the public arena. So all of our cases are in one of those 4 pillars that all of our cases are being battled. So public arena would include things like workplace, and it would include public monuments and all that. Military, obviously we have a lot of chaplains cases and other things. Schools, we do school cases. Churches and synagogues. We're actually having to represent a number of synagogues around the country who are being attacked in unbelievable ways. So we're having to defend both synagogues, churches, houses of worship, believe it or not, from attack. I'll go over here and then I'll come over. Yeah.
Yeah, in terms of the ACLU, do they in any way support freedom of religion anymore? I mean, I think they used to, but I just get the sense that they have gone so far the other way that they're
not really. Yeah, it's kind of like the ACLU. A broken clock reads right twice a day, right? And that's kind of them. Every once in a while, accidentally, they'll stumble into protecting the Constitution on religious freedom, but usually they're against it. And I've been in debates with their head people before, and they're really a political group now. They've had people evacuate their group, people like Alan Dershowitz and all the principled sort of old-time liberals that actually believed in freedom. They've left the group because they've become politicized. And so they have groups like LGBT constituencies and all that kind of thing. And so if free speech means saying something against one of their groups, they won't protect free speech, which is kind of sad, but that's the case.
Kelly, are the videos you showed us available on your website to help us share the message?
Absolutely, yeah. If you go to our website, you can look at any of the cases. For every case, there's a case page that will show you the legal documents in the case, the videos, the information, and you can send those links to other people as well. And I just hit the tip of the iceberg, I mean, there's A lot of different cases you could be talking about. The Coons cheerleaders case, believe it or not, is still going on with the cheerleaders who mentioned God on their own homemade banners and were told by the school they couldn't. We've won that every step of the way, but there's just a ton of these things still being fought out through the system. Yeah, go ahead.
Everything you've talked about is us being attacked and we're defending. What can we do to turn the tables and go on the attack?
Yeah, we're doing that in a lot of different ways. One of the examples I would say would be what we're doing with judges right now. That's an offensive long-term attack. Because, for instance, one of the people who work for us is about to have his hearing here in about 2 weeks. Looks like there's not going to be any stopping him. He'll be appointed and get through and get confirmed absent something really bizarre happening at this point. And he will be a federal judge for life. He's 39 years old. He's going to be on the court a long time. This guy's very smart. He would never budge off the Constitution, and he's going to be a federal district court judge in Texas. So when our kids and our grandkids, have a case about the Constitution in the future, they're going to get the Constitution protected. So that would be one. There's other offensive strategies I could tell you about. I'll just do one real quick. There's a group called the Freedom from Religion Foundation that can run around sending out letters threatening people. They'll threaten a city. They'll say, we see that you have a steeple on your city seal, and you either remove that steeple or we're going to sue you. And we go to them and we say, look, we'll represent you for free. We'll bring in the best attorneys in the country. And so there's really no downside. They say, yeah, but if we lose, we have to pay their attorney's fees, and so we don't want to risk anything, so we're just going to take the steeple off our city seal. So literally we were having things happen around the country that we were losing our religious heritage and freedom. So we came up with the idea of getting fundraising and getting a $3 million fund put together where we could use $1 million to pay all the out-of-pockets for all the national attorneys who would donate their time. And then $2 million would be in a fund so that we could go to the city and say, not only will we represent you for free, not only will you have the best attorneys in the country, but you see this $2 million, anything assessed against you is covered. And since we've done that, I think we're over 20 times in a row, the Freedom from Religion sends a threatening letter. We go to the city or county or school district, whoever, we say, we'll represent you for free, here's the fund, the whole deal. They say, all right, and we analyze what the Freedom of Religion says, which is almost always wrong. And we say, this is not the law. We send them a letter back. We say, you're wrong in the law. Come on. And 20 times in a row, they run the other direction. And so we hope to get to the point where their letters become a joke. And so that's sort of an offensive strategy. So there's some different offensive strategies, but to me, right now, the biggest is the judges and what's going on there. Yeah.
Yes, Kelly, can you comment some on your pro-life work in the past? I have friends that were clients of yours way back in the day. And also, I'm curious if you could comment a little bit about what's going on with Apple right now with the Human Coalition app here in this area that's being used by churches and individuals around the world like myself.
On life, just so you know, our commitment at First Liberty when we went national was all we do is religious freedom. So nothing beyond it. Now, we had 3 clients, for instance, down in Austin a few years ago that were pregnancy care centers that were religiously run, and the city of Austin tried to tell them they had to put these signs on their door, And so we ended up suing the city of Austin, and it was fun not only to win the federal case, but to actually have them write a check for about $500,000 to all the attorneys who donated their time in the case. And I'll tell you, it's interesting you ask the question. The guy who I'm talking about, who's about to be a federal judge for life, the reason he knows about us is his mom was a pro-life activist, and she was threatened for protesting and peacefully doing what she had a right to do as a citizen. And she came to us way back. And then there's a young boy who saw this happen, and he wrote his paper in like junior high and high school on how he wanted to be a religious freedom lawyer when he got older. And he got out. He ended up working for one of the biggest law firms in the country for, I think, 5 or 6 years. Then he went into the U.S. Attorney's Office and he prosecuted terrorists for about 7 years. And then he came to work for us. And now he's about to be federal judge for life. And really that all goes back to his mom and her pro-life stance and what she stood for. So it's kind of neat. I'll say this with I don't know about the particular program you're talking about, but I'll say this. It's called Human Coalition. It's the thing I'm very concerned about with Google and Yahoo and a number of these. It's getting really dangerous how they're becoming. Well, they are monopolies, and they're now engaging in censorship. And for instance, we're having people coming to us now and saying they have now cut off our credit card accessing service because of our religious beliefs, because we're on the SPLC hate list. And so there's people that are literally having their bank, their money dry up, their credit card accessing services stopped. You probably seen what happened with Dennis Prager and his videos that are being censored off of YouTube. What's going on is really, really dangerous, and the real answer to the problem, to be honest, is, and the Republicans led this in the past, is there's going to have to be another antitrust movement. These are monopolies, and monopolies destroy competition, and we don't allow that in the United States. And so they're going to have to get a hold of this because they're controlling our communication, they're controlling everything, and right now they're being let to do so. And so you have things like, I mean, it's just ridiculous that a 5-minute video on the 10 Commandments would be put, that YouTube would list it as pornography, so it would be restricted on everybody's computer who has an anti-porn deal. And so that's the kind of silliness that we see going on. But I think, unfortunately, there's some lawsuits that have been filed. I think those are going to be very difficult. I think that the real answer is going to have to be legislation through Congress to bust up the antitrust situation that's going on, because it's a monopoly is what's happening, and that's why they have control and feel like they can do whatever they want. I think if people realize what was going on too, I think a lot of people would react. But I think most people have no idea how, when you send something out, how what you're sending is being controlled and censored in a way that is not even-handed. And I can tell you a lot of info, I just don't have time, but these groups are not being neutral. And there are people they will not allow you to reach because they don't want you to begin to have a conversation and bring them over. They're restricting your content and where it goes. And there's lots of proof of there's been some different legal actions that have gotten to the infrastructure behind what they're doing. So it really is sad to see what these companies are doing. And but you know what? If the market doesn't react and we don't pass any laws, it's just going to continue, unfortunately. We have any more time, or are we out of time?
This will be the last one.
Okay.
Back to the Freedom from Religion Foundation, couldn't they be prosecuted for writing letters that are pushing an agenda or making false statements and claims?
No, they basically there's law that protects people's right to bring lawsuits or under the Constitution. The only way you can nail them for, because we want to encourage people to bring lawsuits and protect the Constitution is the reason for this. The only way you can do it is if they're groundless and frivolous, which is a pretty tough standard to meet, but if they are groundless and frivolous, then you can nail them with having to pay for the attorney's fees and everything that has to be spent. But generally that's hard to do because, again, we want the policy to be to encourage people to bring lawsuits or to threaten lawsuits against the government when somebody thinks that they're actually stepping over the line with the Constitution. And so that's why we have the law that kind of leans that way. So you can have these people, bring these things that really aren't going to win, and they're just trying to intimidate people, and unfortunately we've got a lot of elected officials who just bow down and fold up, and we've just got to have good officials who stand their ground, because when they do, these people run away. It's all, the Freedom from Religion Foundation hardly ever wins a lawsuit. They're not very good. We beat the ACLU in pretty much every case we've ever been in. We've beaten the Freedom from Religion Foundation in every case we've been in. They're not very good lawyers. They just work off of intimidation. And so it's just got to be people standing up and saying no. Unfortunately, not everybody's like we are in Texas. So anyway, thank you. I know we're out of time. We ran over a little bit. And give your cards to Don, and we'll get you in the loop. And if you ever need any help, call us. We're that thing that's free.
So if you guys are
Facebook. I mean, like, he's speaking, and I took his picture, because we like, famous people with Northeast Tarrant Tea Party behind him. So I put it on Facebook, and I'm like, I'm sorry, Lizzie, I've done the best I can, and what's going to happen to our country? And then it turns around, it's like, we win 98% of our cases, and I'm like, wait, correction. So I don't feel nearly as depressed. So that was awesome. I was asked to make one more announcement. Tomorrow at 2 o'clock on Facebook, Michael Quinn Sullivan will be interviewing George Bush, I hate to say that name too, about the Alamo. So we all know there's a big deal going on, so if you want to tune in for that, that would be great. But otherwise, we will see you guys in January. Thank you so much, both of our speakers.